Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. On this week's episode, Aaron, and Kevin talking about the parable of the Prodigal Son and what it tells us about evangelism, reaching out to people who are lost, but also the Father's welcome for us into His loving arms. So in this conversation, we get real practical about maybe how to go about having evangelistic conversations and seeking after people who are lost. So if you're thinking about those things, wondering how to do that, how to actually put it into practice, well, this is an episode for you. And as always, we hope you enjoy it. Cheers, Kevin.
Greetings, Aaron. That was a nice clink.
You drinking beer?
Yeah, root beer, Fountain Classics,
I doubt it.
cold brewed draft. It's pretty good.
Seems like reckless living, Kevin.
It is a little reckless. It's got 150, calories. I'm drinking my calories.
We just had pizza.
It includes 38 grams of added sugars. That's actually the worst part.
It is.
150 calories ain't so bad.
No.
But 38 grams of sugars is like 2
Serving
days.
size, quarter of a bottle.
No, it says one bottle. I'll hold that to the camera. You like root beer? Yeah.
I do like root beer, but I haven't had pop, as I call it.
Mm-hmm. I used to call it that when I lived in Nevada.
I haven't had any. I don't even know the last time I had any pop.
Yeah.
I haven't had any in a long time.
I used to think my youngest brother, Joseph, was, I just felt like he thought he was better than the rest of us. Because he was the first one in my family to stop drinking soda or pop, And turns out, no, it's actually like a decently, good, like healthy life choice. So now, it's very rare. But for some reason, because we had pizza and like root beer and pizza in my mind.
Sound good? Does it taste good?
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Every other soda that I've had soda every now and then, but man, it does you feel the granules on your teeth, I'm getting a little bit of that, but.
You know what also tastes good with pizza?
Yeah.
Regular beer.
It does.
But maybe not at noon in the church kitchen.
No, let's stick to the root kind.
Sorry, should we edit that out? Nah.
No.
Just kidding. We don't edit anything out. Kevin, I was teasing our listeners.
That's right. Yeah.
No.
But if you ever want to talk about any of this,
yes,
we are open to it. We don't want to give you a bad impression.
Right. I don't know. I was teasing though about the reckless living thing, but it was kind of. I mean,
you're trying to tangentially relate us to.
Should I?
Yeah, dude, get us there.
Tangentially relate us or get us there directly?
Either way.
I was thinking. So we were talking about the prodigal son on Sunday, kind of primarily. And he's the son who goes out and squanders his parents' wealth or his dad's inheritance on reckless living.
That's right.
Which, you can only imagine what that is. But his older brother later on hints at it that his brother, that the younger son spent money on prostitutes and all kinds of stuff. Like I'm sure he was getting after it.
It is
whatever.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting, like in the narrative that it's such an amazing story. It sounds so lifelike.
Right.
But it's just a parable. Like Jesus telling a made-up story, right? And it is interesting that he doesn't give any details about what the young son. He just says, squandered away in reckless living,
right?
And that's kind of it. And then later, the older brother, Like,
but I was just gonna say all of Jesus' parables are really kind of real stuff. The ones right before the prodigal son, it's about a woman who loses a coin.
Yeah, right.
It's about a shepherd who loses a sheep. Mm-hmm. Think about the parable of the sower. It's about a guy who's scattering seed.
Yeah, that guy's doing it bad though. He's a bad farmer.
He is. Yeah.
Same with that guy who hires people to work, and he's like, "Hey, you only worked 1 hour? Here, I'll pay you a full day."
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes they're like, "Oh, that's kind of weird."
Yeah.
But this one, the parable of the prodigal son, to me has always been very. It's crazy how lifelike it seems,
For sure. If we're going to make an assumption, listeners, that you know the parable of the prodigal son, and if you don't know it, it's in Luke chapter 15, and perhaps you'll pick up on the story as we're talking about it, if you're not aware of it. But there's kind of three main characters in the story. There's a dad, the younger son, and the older son. Mm-hmm. Who do you resonate with most in that story?
Oh man, well, usually younger son is like my instant kind of resonation, and I feel like I identify with him a little bit more, but I know that like being a person within the church, and I like grew up in the church, I think there's always the danger, and it's like almost you got to keep it in front of you a little bit of the older son issue, right? Because Jesus, and I think you were pretty explicit about that in the sermon, like he listen who he's talking to. He's talking to the scribes and the Pharisees. These are the church workers, right? These are the pastors. These are the church people, and the kind of sinners and tax collectors that are around were probably more the prodigal son object people, or kind of that connection. So like, I don't know. I mean, and I think in your sermon too, you acknowledge that like we all have had prodigal son moments, right? Or maybe seasons in our life. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that really answers your question, Aaron.
No, definitely resonate with. I personally with both the younger son and the older son, and I mean the older son piece is just it's hard, and I said it. I think I said it twice in my sermon, because I did this bit where I pretended my phone was lost, and went searching for it and found it. And I don't know if you've had, I'm sure you've had that experience, where you probably misplaced your phone.
Oh yeah, I misplaced so many things.
Right, and like, I mean, honestly, what do you do when it's missing? Like, what happens viscerally in your body? You like tighten up. You get like, oh man, where is it?
Right.
And there's some stuff that goes missing where you're just like, I don't.
It's like whatever.
Who cares? But there's some of this, like your car keys or whatever. It's like
panic.
Yeah, it's got to be here somewhere. Right. And so I said in my sermon 2 times, like I think unfortunately, a lot of times we're way more urgent about finding our lost stuff. We'd care more about finding our lost stuff than we would about finding a lost soul. We're caring more about that than somebody who dies not knowing Jesus, I don't know if that's true for everybody, but that word I think was certainly necessary for my own ears to hear and my own heart to hear. Just because it's like, personally, I'm gonna think about that. I don't know. Those of you who are listening to us preach, like, at least speaking for myself, but hopefully for you as well. Like we preach things that need to be preached to us. Like, so if there's stuff that sits with you, that you hear in sermons, there's stuff that sits with us that God revealed to us to preach. And for me, it was that tangible thing of like thinking about my phone. And I don't even use I use my phone a lot, but I'm not like addicted to it, but I need it for a lot of stuff, like I use it. All right, I'm saying that I'm not addicted to it, but it would be weird to not have it for a lot of stuff. Anyways, so if it goes missing, I'm like, oh man, like, where is it? Where is it? But when I think about all the lost people in this world, I'm like, man, I don't have that same kind of urgency. I feel like that's what God's calling us to, though.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, it might be helpful to get like behind this, what seems like a phenomena of why wouldn't I have this, the same urgency, or why would I have it over my phone and not other people? Like, what do you think? I'm trying to get into the kind of the psychology of us, because like, I think in general, like in my experience of other Christians and just in my own life, like we have, maybe not everyone, but like many people have people who they're like, it's very clear, like they're kind of the people, like when you hear something like that, it's like actual people pop in my mind, like this person, person A, person B, person C. Like, do you think, I guess when it comes to the urgency, are you thinking of like the urgency in reaching those people we're already thinking about, or like trying to find other people, because I think it is complicated, right? Like this.
For sure.
Evangelism is complicated.
In
my experience.
Yeah. I think it's both, and it's both talking to people that we already know that God's put in our lives, but there are opportunities to go outside of our realm as well. But let's just first talk about the people who we're already in contact with. And I'll just share, let me first make a statement and then share a story. So the statement is, I think we need to be ready at all times to speak about Jesus, because the opportunities will pop up. And to not do it in some sort of, you got to have a grandiose explanation of the scriptures or whatever, but just a simple testimony about what Jesus means to you personally, how you've experienced him or whatever. The brief story is there's a young college student, young woman who attends our church, and she's been sharing some of her story with us, and she became a Christian at campus. As a student, grew up in a non-Christian home, but she played a lot of sports, super active in high school sports and then collegiate sports, and said to a coach at school, I don't know what I'm gonna do after sports are out of my life. What did you do, coach, when you no longer were competing? And the coach said, well, I've turned to my I just turned to my faith. And this young student didn't know Jesus and said, what does that mean? And the coach started meeting regularly with this young woman. She confesses Jesus as her savior now. So from that coach's perspective, the coach could have said anything. And the coach could have just said, my faith, I lean on my faith, and left it at that. But the coach went a step further and gave the invitation. Do you want to meet up and talk more about this? And so they did weekly. And they would meet up and talk about faith and talk about life and talk about faith and talk about life. And there were further invitations then to go to church and further invitations to join Bible study. So, I think we just need to be ready for to enter those conversations about faith and to take it a step further beyond that one conversation to say, we want to have more conversation about that, So, and that's what we can do with the people that are right around us, that we're already in relationship with, I think of it as, I try to view the entire world, everything that's happening in the world, all of my conversations through the lens of Jesus. Right? So if I'm viewing the whole world through the lens of Jesus and what Jesus would say about this situation, how eternal life plays into this, how forgiveness and hope and all these things can be offered to all of these people in these places, if that's the lens by which I'm seeing everything, then every conversation is filtered through that, and every relationship. So we should just be ready at all times to speak about our faith, So that's the first thing. Does that make sense?
Part one, I think so. You're saying basically we want to have a kind of working knowledge, working practice of being able to talk faith, right? If I can't talk faith, I'm trying to follow Jesus, I go to a church, but I don't really feel like I can say much about my faith, I'm not there yet, that there's kind of some progress or work to be done,
right.
Some sorting out for myself with Jesus of, all right, what is this all about? How can I see things more through that lens you're talking about, so that way I'm prepared?
Yep. And so if that's you, if you're listening and saying, I kind of have a head knowledge about who Jesus is, but I don't yet know how to speak it, what I would say is, what we're talking about, this is biblical discipleship kind of stuff. So what I would say to you is, ask another Christian person who maybe is demonstrating that they do have kind of a working faith, they're putting it into practice. Ask them to out to lunch, ask them out to coffee, so that you can start having faith conversations, so that you can start putting it into practice. That's what whenever we talk about discipleship, that's what we're talking about. Like just having somebody where you can practice this stuff so that you're having faith conversations, so that then whenever you're having a conversation with somebody that's not a Christian, the stuff that you've been practicing, you can do.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad, that there's that invitation to folks listening of, just if there's someone in your life who you can think of who's, you see as kind of spiritually mature, or someone who you kind of look up to almost in the faith, ask them out. They would probably love to talk to you about it, because there's maybe not, I think this is like, we've talked about this, you and I, Aaron, have talked about this, like that maybe in our context, there hasn't been a whole lot of like biblical discipleship as part of the Christian way of living.
Yeah.
Like it seems like, I know in my experience, it was pretty like, I had the corporate side of things, which was like go to church on Sunday, but then after that, it was kind of just me on my own.
Yeah, or maybe you have teachers, like teaching, large group or whatever, if it's a pastor or a professor or
Sunday school even.
Yeah. But it's still like, it's not a deep relationship. It's just kind of more content, like giving content and
kind of abstract. It's not like, hey, here's what I'm going through, like in my life right now.
Right.
How is Jesus interacting with this at all?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in discipleship, when we're in those one-on-one relationships, that's a great opportunity to also talk about evangelism. So, if I do biblical discipleship with a couple people, and what we're always talking about is what about the people that don't know Jesus that you're around, and sometimes we even practice like role play conversations that might happen. Like, what would you say if I said this? We talk about it and practice it. And I think you don't have to be a pastor to do that. Like you can just, if you got Christian friends, just talk about that. Just get those conversations rolling. So
yeah. And I think maybe that's one of the biggest. It's like, kind of like scary is one way to put it, but really what it is, it's very empowering what Jesus does with the disciples, because he ascends into heaven, and they're like, wait, where are you going, Jesus? Like, we needed you. And he's like, I'm going to send you a spirit. Yeah. He's going to help you. But like, God actually places this mission into the hands of his followers, which is like really wild. It's like God already came. Jesus died. We don't have to go die on a cross. Right. We don't have to bear hell for the sake of the world like Jesus did. But we get the kind of the privilege of coming alongside Jesus and him actually speaking through us to these people in our life. But it does take like practice. It's not just like, you're not going to randomly be on a bench one day, probably, and the Holy Spirit just descends on you, like in that moment, and there's been no practice, and all of a sudden you're just like,
oh yeah, right. I mean, that's what Paul says to his I think it's to Timothy. I have to find it off the top of my head, but he says, what you've seen and heard and received from me. So as Paul was teaching other people about Jesus, he says, practice these things. Practice. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I mean,
any other discipline that we have?
Yeah. I was teaching in Bible class yesterday. When Jesus tells parables, he sometimes, like after the parable of the sower, he said to the group, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So he tells this whole parable with the story, and then says, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." You're like, what is that? What does that mean? The biblical word, or in the Greek language, the word for hear, like with your ears, when you take information in, and the word obey are very closely connected. The word for hear is akou or akuo, something like that. Yeah. And the word for obey is hypokuo or hypokuo. So hear and obey, which are very closely linked, right? So Jesus doesn't just want us to hear his word and be like, yeah, that's a good word, but to actually obey it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he says it in the Great Commission. He says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And I'm with you always to the end of the age. But we do the same thing with our kids too, right? If I'm talking to my children and they're young, they get distracted, we're always practicing like listening right away. And one of my kids right now is having a hard time listening right away. And so we're talking about like listening right away. But what I mean by that, and for real, what we mean is, don't just hear my words, but please do what I'm asking you.
Right.
But we say, I'm not gonna name this child by name. I'm not even saying the gender. I'm gonna let this child just be this child.
Yeah,
right
good.
Because they've all gone through these phases, and we all have.
Us too, right? Yeah.
So this child is just like, listen, please open your ears. Do you listen right away the first time? You know, and what I really mean is, please just do what I'm asking. And I'm not asking anything. It's just like,
yeah, like normal stuff.
Like, go wash your hands, please. You know, like that kind of stuff.
Brush your teeth.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that helps. Like, you know, because I think sometimes this idea of even the Great Commission and go and make disciples of all nations, like it sounds like such a huge task or huge command that like I think sometimes we're kind of like, how in the world am I ever going to be able to do this? Yeah. Like this is too heavy, Jesus, right? But then like Jesus says in another spot, like, you know, take my yoke, it's light, you know? Yeah. So like Jesus isn't trying to lay on us some sort of massive burden that we have to shoulder for him or something. No. And you kind of alluded to this, I think, at the end of the first service. You made a comment about Jesus' presence with us.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that a little bit, like in terms of?
Well, so Jesus, the Son of Man, came into the world to seek and save the lost. I mean, that's the point of like these parables.
Yeah.
And those words are in a different part of Luke. They're not directly connected to these three parables, but it's the same deal. Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Jesus is the one who saves the lost. We can't save lost people. Mm-hmm. Jesus is the only one who can give salvation. Like we can't do that. Jesus is also the one who seeks the lost, even still to this day. Like in the world, Jesus is seeking. He's seeking after all lost people because he desires all people to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. So Jesus is out in the world doing this work, preparing hearts by the power of his Spirit. He's working all the time. He's just saying, he says, follow me as I seek and save the lost, and let me show you these opportunities and these people to speak to. So like this coach and this student.
Yeah.
Like the student, God was preparing something there, right? This moment of like desperation, this moment of lostness, really. Like, who am I going to be without sports? I don't know myself without that reality. That's a statement of lostness, right? Like, I don't have direction. I don't know, no identity. And so the coach takes the opportunity to say, I'll show you a way, I'll show you the way, Jesus, right? So God was already at work in the student's life. God was at work in the coach's life, making the opportunity happen. Did the coach the coach could have said something different, right? The coach didn't have to say faith.
Yeah.
The coach could have said, I turned to coaching.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I'm not an athlete. I love coaching. That's where I invest a lot of my time now.
Yeah.
But no, I went to faith and a deeper invitation. So
yeah. So kind of in that, like, there's like this really complex work that has happened in both the student's life and the teacher's life that God has been orchestrating. Like He's been above it. He's given them life experience. He's even connected them through this, athletic experience. Right. And then there's just that one moment where the coach gets to step in and kind of everything else has been set up. Yeah. And so she's able to just say that simple invitation. Right. I've heard an author describe it kind of like you start your car, right? Like, how hard is it to start your car? well, it's really easy. You just turn the key, you know? Well, it's not that simple, right? There's a bunch of other stuff going on in the background who, you know, like brilliant people have crafted and invented this machinery to work. So these things are firing, you know, but to me, it just looks like turning a key, you know? And so it's kind of the same thing. Like, you're not out there. It's not like you have to go downtown, go hunt, you know, for people at random to try and just like shove Jesus, you know, onto them. But God He's been preparing you. He has been working in your life already, and He has positioned you with other people in your life who, well, I guess are at varying degrees from Him.
Right. And I think we just need to be aware of, again, be aware of the opportunities and when to speak and when not to speak, and trust the Spirit's guidance in that. So it popped in my head. I don't think I told you about this, but you're talking about starting your car.
Yeah.
We've both shared with each other that neither of us are very good mechanics. But have you ever had those moments? Like, I always want to be a helpful person. Like, you see somebody that's like struggling with their hood up in their car, and I want to be that guy who's like, can I help you? But sometimes I'm like, what would I do?
How would I be?
Oh man, I'm thinking of a greater like context here of like evangelism there, and our worry about like not being able to say the right thing. I was not going to go there, but so here's what happened last week. I was in downtown Houghton. I had been at a coffee shop, and I left the coffee shop, and I was going back to my car, and there was a person parked right behind me with her hood up. It was a young woman, and she had a socket set out, and I was like, oh, like. So I was just going to get in my car because it looked like she had it under control, and I just said, how you doing? And she looked at me and goes, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, you know, like at that point I can't just walk away. You know? But you know, so I just said, what's going on with the car? She's like, well, I was driving down the road, and all the power just went out of my car, and thankfully there was this spot, and I was able to pull in real quick and stop the car, but I like lost all the lights and power and everything. I was like, oh man. And she's like, now it won't start. And I'm like, and so she had I don't know what she was trying to do with her battery or something, but then thought she had the wrong socket and stuff. And I don't know. I'm not a good mechanic at all, but I was like, I don't know, it might be the connection on your battery. And so I do my mechanical stuff like I've watched other people do, and I just wiggled the cables. And when I wiggled the cable, like her lights flashed on, so she must have had the key on. And I was like, I don't know, you want to try to start your car or something? And so she got in, and it started right away.
Whoa.
And I was like, all right. I said, maybe the cable is loose. And she's like, I don't have the right socket. And then I looked, and she actually did. And so I tightened it up, and then it started some more and stuff. And anyways, in the whole time of that event, what's going through my mind is, this is a person in need, right? I don't know this person. Is there going to be an opportunity for me to say something about my faith or Jesus? Is this going to lead to a different kind of conversation besides just helping with the car?
Yeah.
It didn't. Nothing. Like, she was grateful, didn't have a lot of words. Basically, all we were dealing with was the car. And I did a helpful thing for somebody, but it didn't turn into any evangelistic conversation.
Yeah.
You know, could I have forced it? I guess, you know, I could have said, yeah, for sure. I could have said, you know, Jesus loves you, you know, or I'm a pastor at a local church. Why don't you come to church on Sunday? Like, I don't, right? I mean, I could have said anything, but I didn't, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, was I right or wrong in that situation? I don't know. I'm at peace with the fact that I helped somebody in need, and I think that that's a good thing to do. And who knows how that transpired in her life and the relationships that she had. I don't know. You don't know. So there's an awareness issue of like knowing when to speak or respond or share and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. That's a bit tangential, but just kind of a practical, personal experience.
And helps show, because you know, like we don't want you to think that, like your whole life somehow now has to just change into like only these one conversations, because that's probably not going to be all that effective.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people who like only talk about one thing, and you're like, oh geez, give it a rest. But like the scriptures are pretty, I mean, they speak about the Spirit giving us the words, right? And kind of that like spiritual, I guess, intuition that comes in these moments. But there is like for God's word to work through us and come out of us, we kind of have to have that practice and built in with Jesus ourselves, right? Yeah. Like the more that He kind of has His way with us, So that's kind of like step one, really. I think it's like you got to have. You want to know the depth of His love for you, right?
Right.
Like if you're not there, where you're not really like grasping how deep and far and wide His love is for you, like. Live on that, because that's what's going to come through you. Because you want, this happens kind of come full circle to the prodigal story. He comes home, and the dad's just like, we got a party, right? We got to celebrate. And he even tells the older brother, who's like all miffed about it, because he's jealous about his younger brother, basically like getting away without getting punished, And the father says, it was good, it was fitting. It was fitting for us to celebrate. Yeah. And in the other two parables, the lost coin and the lost sheep, they come home. They rejoice. Yeah. They're calling up their neighbor. Come on over, man. Yeah. And that's like when we really, if we meditate on what a treasure it is that we have in Jesus. Mm-hmm. At some point, that it will kind of explode through you. You know what I'm saying? Like it shoots out because it's too good. Yeah. It's like I can't not talk about this thing, Now I don't want to make it every conversation and not listen to other people too, but when those moments come, there'll be something to them. I don't know. It's hard.
Well, I was going to ask you too. I asked like who you resonate with in that story. Yeah. I was going to ask like, have you ever felt like the Father?
I don't know. I am a father. My kids are pretty young, but I don't know that I have.
I have. When I've seen people come to faith in Jesus and I've seen their lives changed and transformed by the good news of Jesus, that's where it's like, holy smokes, that's incredible. Like I just want to celebrate, Yeah. But ultimately, what's happening there too is like facilitating. Not the relationship they have with me, but helping to facilitate the relationship that they have with the Father, which is super cool. I heard a pastor talk recently and he was saying, have you ever seen like videos on YouTube of children who like get like the cochlear implants in their ear to be able to hear for the very first time, and it's incredible, like to see that joy of like hearing their own voice. Yeah. So the pastor said he saw this one video of a child like, making a little sound and smiling, and then there's this voice in the room that says the child's name. I don't remember the child's name, but child, and the child's like face. Just opens up and turns around, and it's the kid's dad. Mm-hmm. So hearing the Father's voice for the first time, and they just embrace, And the pastor said, who in that room was, most filled with joy or whatever in that moment, And he said, like, is it the child? Yeah, for sure. Is it the dad? Yeah. But he's like, what about the audiologist who like facilitated this reunification that for the child to hear her father's voice for the first time? Yeah. And he was making the connection saying like, that's the role that we get to play as people in this divine relationship. Like, we're not the ones who get to save people. We're not God the Heavenly Father, but we get to introduce people to the voice of their Father, and to see children of God hear their Father's voice for the first time and be welcomed into his loving arms. Like, I was like, whew, like that's
powerful.
That's cool, you know, that's cool. And I think like, so when we're talking about evangelism and seeking the lost and stuff, like, it's not about us. It's not about us. It's about introducing people to the Father and letting them know that they've always got a place in his loving arms, and he is calling out to them whether they know it or not. Like, and so just as he's calling out to us day after day, come home, come to my loving arms, I forgive you, you're welcome here. Like, that word is going out to all people. So like, just let's be people who help that message to get to people who need to hear it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good word, man. I mean, I appreciate it. I know, like, yeah, it's, if nothing else, it's like, man, yeah, like, what are our devices? What are the distractions even in my life, you know? Like, it's so easy to let things that are small become and get more value and priority that are actually that satisfying, you know? Like, if you really take a moment, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't really feel like this deep joy, you know, like you're talking about the child and the father and the audiologist, but this business of sharing what we have is very much rooted in joy. I mean, like the father being back home and saying, you know, it's fitting for us to celebrate, right, and be glad. Yeah, no, it's a good word, man. I appreciate you putting it back on our radars, and to think of who is it in my world, in my life, that maybe God has positioned me near for this very thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if just one. That's what Jesus says, right? Just one.
Yeah.
One sheep, one coin, just one son.
That's right, yeah.
All of those, it's just one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not me to a million, but it's a million people to just one.
Yeah. So, there you go.
Cool.
We'll end it on that.
Hey, man.
All right.
Well, good talking to you.
Yeah,
buddy.
you too, bud.
Good week.
All right.